Right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the panel, the Fireside Chat. I'm Claudius. The topic today over here is hyper-personalizing customer experience along the digital journey. Right. So, good morning to whoever's in Singapore, and then evening and afternoon to whoever's outside there. Right. So, my name's Claudius. I'm from Singapore Chamber of E-commerce. All right. Today's panel. Let me just introduce this panel first. All right. So, maybe as a start, let's look at let's look at our current situation. COVID-19 has accelerated digital transformation along with e-commerce. Online retail is now dominating physical brick and mortar retail, with online sales increasing 200% in APAC since the pandemic took hold. The customer experience function has become increasingly important as competing online brands continue to enhance their online experience to remain competitive. Furthermore, social distancing has changed the utility of retail locations as brands implement contactless delivery. Overall, brands need to prioritize omnichannel customer communication for proactive communication, for order fulfillment, and also to scale digital customer services and to enable digital consumers. So in this panel discussion, we will discuss the pillars for delivering impactful customer experience via communications and share some trends from the region's leading expert. Today's panel features 4 of the region's very esteemed leaders from different areas of e-commerce, and we would like especially to thank Trilio today for sponsoring this panel. Okay, so as you can see, our panelists are already here. I would like our panelists to introduce themselves. Right, let's start off with Alex from Trilio. Alex.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alex Bravo, and I am an industries marketing manager at Twilio and the subject matter expert for retail and travel and hospitality. I'm particularly fond of the topic that we're going to be speaking about today, more so because my background in business strategy, market development, and more so the time that I spent at Harvard, I did it researching behavioral economics and the impact on empathy or with empathy. And so now that we're dealing with COVID, we're starting to see how businesses are prioritizing their empathetic approach to doing business. And I think it's going to be a wonderful conversation tonight. Thank you for having me.
Great, thank you. So next, I would like to introduce Armin. He's from Nestle. So Armin, you want to take over?
Thanks, Claudius. Hey, everyone. My name's Armin. I'm the Digital Operations Manager for Nestle Oceania. So consumers are the lifeline of Nestle, and understanding what they want and how do we deliver personalization at scale is the key to our success and existence. But it also gives us a lot of sleepless nights having to deliver that. So it's exciting to be part of the panel, and it's an exciting time for the industry.
All right, thank you, Armin. Next, I'd like to introduce Danny from Zalora. He's in Hong Kong right now. So Danny.
Hi, everyone. So this is Danny. I'm now based in Hong Kong with Gobi China, which is venture capital investing in tech-related startups. But prior to my VC life, actually do a couple of acceleration for retailers, including Zalora, as mentioned, and also like some of the other brands like Watsons or Uniqlo. I was in the marketing technology side, being a vendor to help them do the personalization and growth hacking initiative. So good to be discussing with panelists from other region in what's the latest development.
Great, sounds good. In fact, I can learn a lot on Danny. Right, okay. Let's start off with some questions. I think number one is that I would like to just warm you up because I would like to have you to let us know, actually, in your statement, in your space, in your area, what is the customer experience in context to your area? Customer experience. Can we have first Alex to share with us?
Yes, absolutely. I think this 2020, which is thankfully coming to an end, has been a rude awakening for many of us in terms of what it means to do business and what it means to truly develop meaningful relationships with our customers. for the communications aspect in particular, Twilio was at the forefront of really enabling everything from healthcare to financial services to retailers, which were, some of the industries that were more affected because they were in the front line of the situation. And so what we were seeing is that many of our customers and partners were really accelerating their digitalization strategies, so much so that now the average company is accelerating their digital strategy by 6 years. So this is definitely changing the game for where and how companies are prioritizing their investment and how they're really implementing different types of technologies that allow them to be more flexible and malleable, because now we're understanding that the present is very difficult to deal with because now the future is highly unpredictable. The variables are changing almost daily. Let's not, forget the situation of tariffs, politics, the environment, and now this, health concern that has affected us globally. So what we're seeing is that in general, companies are relying heavily on communication systems and solutions to pivot, adapt, and really respond to what the market is saying. And obviously throughout the conversation, I'll go more in general, but it's really been a highlight of how do we accelerate faster and how are we nimble in offering our customers what they need, when and how they want it through the right channels.
Great. Very good answer. All right. Can we have Amin to also let us know actually what is the customer experience? Experience in Nestle.
Yeah. So for us, Nestle has more than 2,000 brands. In Oceania, we're managing 47 different brands. The biggest change in the last 10 years, I would say, is 10 years ago, marketing people, all they knew was email. And you had a subscriber list and you would just you had a blast radius of let's just send out newsletters. Fast forward, and today the ecosystem, the marketing and sales ecosystem is significantly different. So we have more channels, we have more customers, we have more touch points, whether it's mobile apps, SMSs, emails, social media. And the thing, consumers are always being challenged for attention. So for us, it's very, very important how we deliver relevant information at relevant contact touch points. So there's an expectation of what you would get from a push notification to your mobile phone. There's an expectation of what you would get in your email, the frequency of send, and the offers. So for us, it's having that maturity and understanding, but fundamentally it boils down to consumer empathy. If it's always putting yourself in that position of the consumer and saying, is this what I would expect? Is this going to surprise and delight me? Or is this going to irritate me? You definitely do not want to be in the irritating category.
No.
So for us,
you do not want to demotivate anybody.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Amin.
Sure.
All right. How about Danny? What is customer experience to you?
Well, I feel like from my previous experience, I helping lots of offline brands trying to accelerate their digital growth. One of the challenge or the customer, what they're expecting is like, can I feel the same when I'm browsing the website versus like, am I visiting their store? So for example, lots of beauty brands like cosmetic pharmacy chain that we work together, people love to visit their regular store because like their beauty advisor there will remember their preference, their, let's say, skin quality or the skin type. And when you are going to the website, even though you are interacting with a keyboard machine, right? How do you give this human touch so that they feel like they're being remembered? They feel like, let's say if they're filing customer inquiries or complaint, they doesn't feel like they're only talking to a robot, but someone that is very humane to have the empathy to them. So I think these human touch, how do you migrate this from a physical store to also the online aspect is the key to create a customer experience for the brands themselves. Yeah.
Thank you. Because I feel that online businesses are really taking a different approach, a very varied approach to their customer experience strategy. And it also depends on whether they are truly online, and a lot of them they're offline. So if they're offline, actually they do have some need for transformation within your organization. So let's say from basic platforms with single image promotion through to let's say AI, chatbot, social commerce. So there seems to be like no obvious standard in terms of customer service to and what to provide customers in the ever growing world in e-commerce, and e-commerce is really going very fast. So how has customers experience evolved in the last few years? Maybe specifically more into this COVID this COVID time, and what elements must brand incorporate to deliver a basic level of customer experience? Alex?
Okay, I'm going to piggyback a little bit on the experience that Armin has shared. And by the way,
Great.
it was so, a great holistic view on the situation of where we were before and where we are today. The thought of personalizing the approach to customer engagement is definitely not new. We've all been getting emails in the past of, mass promotions, mass opportunities. And yes, some of those emails were targeted and specific to a cohort. But now the need to hyper personalize the approach has only elevated because of what you just mentioned, Claudius. The boundaries or limits in perception between what was an e-commerce and a brick and mortar store are now very blurred in the customer's shoes. Why is this? With lockdown and the limitation that we have in terms of human exchanges and experiences, now e-commerce stores and even brick and mortar stores have had to digitalize and really elevate that approach so that it wasn't as monotonous as it was before, and delivery of a message was somewhat tone deaf if it was executed today. And so what have companies been focusing on since the beginning of this outbreak is basically to accentuate the channels that allow companies or their sales representatives, store associates, to continue to have that human interaction, even if it's digital and limited. For example, right now, I'm speaking with you, fine people, virtually, but I can still sense a connection because you can see my eyes, you can see my expressions. And similarly, when clienteling, that before was mostly executed by luxury companies, now has become more mainstream, where we have customer associates video conferencing customers. Danny mentioned beauty clienteling and tutorials that are basically kind of bridging that gap that is occurring so that the sense of customer intimacy continues to be important, not just for the brand, but also for the customers, because that's how they sense that there's an actual connection. And so in general, what we're seeing is that retailers are now testing, A/B testing, exploring different mediums and channels that are more appropriate to continue to deliver this experience, whether it begins, with the shopping. Let's say if you're getting specific notifications or opt-ins, because all of a sudden you're not only relying on SMS, but also including WhatsApp. You can start conversations through WhatsApp, and then you can continue to elevate that with a video interaction that now is starting to also integrate with some augmented reality. And you can even perform within WhatsApp. So if you're calling customer service with WhatsApp, and you don't want to have them change one platform to the other because that creates more friction. So the frictionless, more seamless experiences are what the experiences that retailers are looking to provide. And all of that comes with basically the exploration of additional channels and integrating them by having a centralized view of the customers so that you can understand what is their preferred channel and what is the adequate message that should be delivered and at what time throughout the customer journey.
Wow, that's a mouthful. A lot of things to learn from you. Right.
Maybe I just have too much to say. I talk a lot, but hopefully there's some value in that. It's very exciting.
It comes from really the person who's in the job. Yeah. Okay. What about Danny? Basic level of customer experience. What do you expect that most brands can deliver?
Right. I think Alex just point out a very important point is how do you create this customer-centric communication? Previously, the channels are more simple, or let's say there's a more limited types of channel. Email would be one of the most commonly used one. But now, like give a very simple example. Lots of e-commerce retailers, they do a cart abandonment notification, and they will remind you, okay, you left something in the cart, and sometimes they give you a promotion offer with a voucher code. And this has been done pretty well when the channels are quite limited, because you only receive this once. But when you browse some of the website, you now sometimes feel like, okay, why suddenly there's like 5 different notifications bombarding me from the SMS, like email, or even like ads, retargeting ads. So the customer may not like such kind of experience, because like they don't, the brands themselves didn't create a journey in a sense that they put the customer in the middle. Instead, they are doing the channel optimization in a separate way. So they create a journey per each channel: email, advertising, or SMS, or WhatsApp, or all the other social channels. So that's one thing that I think fundamentally, like how do you make sure that like the journey that you created is using the customer as the centric matrix rather than like a channel specific. And on top of that, I think like on top of the communication, it's also the on-site optimization that is very important. So many brands, they put lots of focus in the outbound messages, but when I visit the website, it still look the same. The homepage still look the same, like no matter what have I done recently. So that's something that I think brands should also invest in a bit more. That is the on-site optimization.
Thank you. I think Danny's background from the startups, because he's a VC, actually enable us to look at a lot of things from the forefront of the industry, because these are the people who are starting up. So at the other side, and I won't say the other side, but at the size of corporation, I think, I mean, you know, this question is coming at you. Yeah. So what about Nestle? Because Nestle is big and you have a lot of brands, right?
Sure.
So how do you deal with the very basic level of customer experience?
Sure. I think Alex raised a good point about customer intimacy, and Danny's touched on the whole process of progressive profiling. So the way that we look at it is we create a lot of segments and micro segments for the consumers, but ultimately, if you talk from a marketing point of view, everybody wants more data, right? But if you go down that strategy very quickly, people will think you're just being creepy, right? You do not want to be. So it comes down to what's the job to be done, right? If we are selling Kit Kat, do we need to know the date of birth, right? If we're not going to surprise and delight, unless we're going to send them a gift on their birthday, and it's really day and month that we need to know, not necessarily the year, then we shouldn't collect that information. So for us, it's how do we reduce that friction point? How do we deliver that personalization? So if we have pet owners, we know that they are pet owners, but we can gradually capture that information to see if they have dogs or cats. And then when they do come to our website a second time, we can start showing them information that's relevant. And that's how we look at building brand loyalty, brand advocacy, and ultimately positive sentiment value. But it comes down to, there's a fine line between intimacy and respecting. But your key job is to deliver surprise and delight. Like collecting all this information, it's pointless unless you're going to use it to delight customers and consumers, because without that, they will not trust you. And I think the trust for a brand like Nestle is very, very important. We do not want to, you have to respect that boundary. You only ask information that you need. You retain it for as long as you need. And they're the key things at forefront of all customer activities that we do.
Sounds like has provided some solutions to what Alex and Danny has spoken. Let's look at the poll. We did the poll just now. So how would you rate your organization's current customer experience based on today's standard? So A, less than 5 out of 10. Our experience offerings are not up to standard. We have 29% of that, people saying that. I'm quite happy with the fact that we have 57% saying that they are above average, not above average, but above average. That their strategies is what's expected, but could do a little better. But we only have 14% saying we're rock stars, right? So that's pretty interesting, right? So most people felt that they have a lot of things to learn and implement, right? So excuse me. So based on what we say just now, I think that's basic standard. But what about bigger brands and a lot more, and people with, or organization with a lot more experience in driving hyper personalization, like Netflix or like Spotify? Because I think the subscription service in 2020 has really gone up, right? Partly because of COVID, right? In terms of using maybe even rich data in AI of their subscribers' interaction, so that they can actually provide recommendation. I think this is what Amin is trying to say as well. And this is used to also rate products and to also their suitability and to ensure that the relevant content is shown. I think we can also see this even from other brands, like even YouTube, things that we use every day. But what about non-subscribers? It's like non-subscription retailers. Can the non-subscription retailers be expected to be able to deliver the same kind of hyper-personalized experience, just like these major subscription services? Are they limited to just growing retailers to providing such an experience? So it's like they're doing well, but what about the others? Are we expected to do that? So is that a hygiene factor? So maybe I think that's a question in which a lot of people want to know as well. So maybe this time we start with Danny. If you can give us an insight on that.
Sure. The brands that you mentioned definitely are the industry leader in terms of the personalization, both like Shopify, Spotify, as well as like Netflix. And there's multiple success factors. Of course, they have a very strong team working on this, but it's also because of the offering that they are doing is more homogeneous, as well as, like you said, it's a subscription-based business model. So people always lock into the system when they start browsing or watching the episode. And the question that you mentioned is that what is the limitation for the retailers? I think definitely the data availability is one of the core one. People don't tend to log into the e-commerce sites, and particularly after GDPR has been implemented recently, there's lots of cookie-based tracking are being limited, and therefore, like, you can't even tell, okay, this session, this visit is actually the same person as the one that come yesterday. And how do you make sure that, like, you could identify this customer is the same person is one of the, I would say, the currently a limitation, particularly after the GDPR. Secondly is like, if you're a marketplace, right, it's very hard for you to have a holistic profiling of the customer, because you usually only have one music player. So not many people will be on the same time on Apple Music as well as like Spotify. But if you are shopping on a fashion e-commerce site, very likely you're gonna have a few go-to places. So it's hard for you to have the overall like profiling of the customer. So that plays another challenges for the retailers. And to maybe share, let's say, an example that what we did in Zalora, we have an initiative a couple of years back that is creating a new tab. It's called Just For You. Basically, it's an alternative homepage. So there will be mostly product recommendation. And to tackle the challenges, like we have do many experiments. Like one is like to try to onboard the customer by having them to, let's say, choose a few products first to understand their interests. But actually, that's not a very easy way, because like customer, they want to come and start browsing what they want instead of like doing kind of like Netflix-like or Pinterest-like onboarding. And so one of the things that we're trying to tackle is like, okay, what is the best time to direct people to this page? Maybe we should have a few interaction, understand maybe the categories they're interested or products that they visit. So we have initial some sort of data that we could curate the recommendation. So then we direct them to such page. So that's one more passive way of doing so. And secondly is like in terms of recommendation, sometimes the data itself is not sufficient enough to give a very accurate product recommendation, but there could be a higher level recommendation that you could still curate for them. For example, instead of recommending exactly which skill that they may be interested, you could recommend the brands or the price point, the price range. So those are the high level categories that, okay, you may miss on the skill recommendation, but okay, this category or this brand is still very relevant to them. And that's something that we also play around with, like instead of like only promoting recommended products, but also high level categories.
Thank you, Danny. I would like to go back to Alex. What do you think about subscription service, and are we able to meet up with the standards of Spotify, Netflix, through hyper-personalization?
I agree with much of what Danny has said, that the fact that it's basically a platform where everybody gathers because they're there for a particular reason. Whereas in retail, the experiences or the touch points are so sprawled from the navigation for shopping to trying to find a product to the actual receivement or like the end of the fulfillment chain rather. Where when we talk about hyper-personalizing the approach, I think we also have to start embracing the conversation about last mile deliveries and fulfillment, because this happened to be the most expensive processes for any retailer. And those are particularly the most siloed, because traditionally what happens in the back end of the house and inventory and even warehousing is not necessarily connected to the experience that we're having, from a customer associate, pretend it's me, with you. Yet with buy online and pick up in store or curbside pickup, those bridges have had to be connected with some sort of let's say communication adaptability, because when it came to the matter, what is really creating the customer experience at the end of the day, now in particular in the times of COVID, is the ability to feel satisfied when you're actually receiving your object or your purchase. Before, it was probably getting the benefit of a promotion or a discount. But now customers are changing their priorities, and now they're making decisions not necessarily based on pricing or brand loyalty, but more so on convenience. And so when it comes to delivering this ability to, bridge the narrative and have a consistent experience from the beginning to the end, which is similar to what Netflix or Spotify offers, they're always giving you what you want. How can e-commerce, big and small, medium-sized businesses deliver in this? It's really about offering contextual information throughout the narrative of the customer journey. And so whether it begins with alerts and notifications when a package begins its trajectory to getting to your hands, to getting information when you're at the store and you want to pick it up, physically, how are you being assigned a parking spot? Is your company using IoT and geofencing to alert not only the user, but also their employees that Alex is here to collect their items? Is the order fulfilled? Is there any issues? Are there discrepancies? If an item was not available in, let's say, chocolate flavor, are you offering a vanilla option like Instacart or Deliveroo offer? You're getting a conversation in real time saying, I'm sorry, we ran out of vanilla pudding, but would you like the chocolate instead? That's what creates that intimacy at scale, by allowing customers to have the opportunity to converse and make their choices, even though it's not as technologically advanced as Spotify or Netflix. It is still something that can emulate those instances with the use of channels in particular.
Thank you. Okay, there's a poll that I think there's a poll here. What do you think the biggest barrier to mimicking a personalization offering like Netflix or Spotify? So let's look at the poll results. I think 40% each have talked about cost and software requirement. I think that's like hand in hand. Time as well. I think too much time, manpower to manage such an offering. Not so sure about that. Maybe we can explore a lot more technology that is backing this offering. I first heard of hyper personalization 2017. And I think just now, as I was driving to work, I saw a lot of companies now already offering this kind of like services throughout. And I'm not so sure whether, because of competition, whether they are still as costly. But I'm very sure that they depend on your organization being able to capture data effectively. So I think in terms of e-commerce, I think that's one of the ways that we can actually have. That's one of the few areas that we can actually have hyper personalization services quite fast. So you are invited to have audience. You're invited to have to ask question to any one of us. In fact, also to look at our poll as well. All right. So I would like to go to yeah. I saw a question. All right. There's a question from the audience. We have evolved from personalization to hyper personalization. Is hyper personalization the peak, or what will be the next big thing? So I'm looking at my next question as well. So maybe we'll gel these two questions together, because most online brands, they are not offering a personalized solution for the customer. Basically, it's just maybe as a start, when they offer, when personalization start, we're talking about customer name. This is who. Then we talk about what they're going to buy. Then we talk about when are they buying. So, and I think with the coming on of better technology, maybe even machine learning, that's coming on board quite a lot of new technology over here. And it's talking about why people buy, because data can actually derive a lot of insights from there. So actually, at this moment, what is the key difference between offering personalization and through to hyper personalization? And what advantage can retailers expect to see by offering hyper personalization? So I think this is a question that can also answer what's the question there is by Hui Wen. So can I ask Amin to start with this question?
Absolutely. It's a tricky one. So I guess if we look at the progression of retail going into online, we look, it's one of the other, it's been mentioned before, you've got people that traditionally they're changing behaviors. So previously it was more convenient to go into store and to pick up a product and come home. Then we started dabbling into, the store might not have it, but online I can either get it cheaper or it's more convenient because the range is greater. So then there was a dabble between online and offline. People would go offline to the retail stores to experience the product, but they don't necessarily want to carry the product, so they would buy it online, or it wasn't available offline. Now what we're seeing is, particularly with the current situation with more people buying online, there's a huge shift in behavior, right? So it's saying, how do you deliver an offline experience online, and how do you make it a seamless experience? What do you need to do that? When a consumer is buying coffee in an espresso store, what is that experience? There's a sensory experience, there's an aroma, there's the theater of the brand. How do you deliver that? The sensories are very, very difficult, right? But can you still create the theater of the brand online? That's when we go into hyper-personalization. The hyper-personalization experience is you cannot do one-for-one match, but there are certain aspects that you can improve on. And it's interesting because you guys also talked about subscription as a service and the impact that it's had on retail. That is one aspect that we regard as hyper-personalization, because if I use the Netflix example, prior to Netflix, you had to physically take the CD back into the store, right? That was an inconvenience factor. And if you were late, you were charged a fee for every day that you were late. So Netflix, the subscription as a service is a convenience factor, but the fact that you're not having to pay for giving videos and discs back late, that's the convenience factor coming into play. That's hyper-personalization, because it's something that online you can do it far better than you could do it offline or in retail. So when we look at delivering coffee, for us, it's not saying, oh, we have to go and do personalization and we have to do subscription as a service because that's the trend. We don't look at it that way. We look at it and say, if I want consistent coffee experience, what would that look like? And just because it worked offline, it doesn't mean it has to work online. I need to change that offer to fit the online experience. Some customers, they know that they have 2 coffees a day and they know how many pods they'll go through. We will give them a subscription service, right? But some customers want to try different flavors and try different aromas. So we have to give them that experience. We cannot force them to say, you have to take this or this is the only offer. I guess the hyper-personalization, in a long story short, is how do you make it more convenient, right? And how do you deliver that experience in a digital format? So it's more data-driven. And the other thing is, how do you, the time to market, how quickly can you turn that around? That's where it all comes together for us. Long answer, but that's the way I got to
it. I think that's actually really quite insightful for even for me, because as I currently having a few projects to help even manufacturers to go online to maybe even to a different country, right? To New Zealand, Australia, and to China. I think there's a lot of what you just said makes sense. Yeah. So the same question, right? So what's the key difference between personalization and hyper personalization? Maybe Alex, you like to answer that as well?
Sure. I think Armin presented the macro narrative, and then when we go into the micro narrative as to, well, how is this executed and delivered? I think where this is where communications, and in particular digital communications, come to save the day. It's been a particular rough road in terms of understanding how do you connect with your customers when they're already very saturated in terms of bombardments with emails, text messages, calls. It's been a particular road now where customers are much more discerning as to where they put their energy and their attention. And they're right now obviously prioritizing convenience. And that also translates into what channels bring them that convenience. So the ability to discern by understanding what a customer prefers in terms of a communication and what type of communication through which channel is what is kind of like a primary skill that brands need to develop now in order to offer that contextualized conversation, but doing it through the right channel. That way the message is not ignored or disregarded. Because when you start hyper-personalizing the actual relationship with the customer, that's when you start discerning what is the best channel to deliver what type of news. So anything that is critical should be pretty much an alert. That is not necessarily only siloed to an in-app alerts, because they're not always opening their apps. But if within their preferences they say that they would rather receive a WhatsApp message as opposed to an SMS message, then it's your responsibility as a brand to deliver on this, because you want to mitigate that noise and that friction for the customer so that you continue to be a favorite. Because trust me, right now, everybody else is figuring this out, and they're going to get there to that particular customer before you do. And so when we talk about loyalty, that has also shifted. What customers deem loyalty right now is highly tied to a retailer's ability to deliver when and how they want to receive that information. And so being tactful and obviously highly empathetic as to, is this just adding noise, or are we actually being purposeful in the way we communicate with them, can definitely break or make the strategy in which a brand is approaching customers today.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions that's out in the Q&A, and I think we are touching some of the answers to those questions. For example, Nina was asking, how do you ensure that the hyper-personalization stays on the side of surprising and creating a delightful experience? and ensuring that the expected experience is delivered instead of getting the consumer to feel quite intrusive. I think we addressed some of that, but I think we can actually address a bit more in terms of how do we surprise them? How do we, I don't know, maybe your wedding anniversary, things like that, right? So and delighting them, and this is basically to build what we have just mentioned about the key results would be a lot of trust, a lot of the having to make sure that the loyalty factor is there. So I think we addressed that. But do you have any examples of creating such surprises or delights that you can actually even measure from your customers? Anybody like to answer this? Is this too open?
Maybe I will take it first.
Happy to touch on the... Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
So, thanks.
I think that's a very difficult balance between, okay, what is like optimal frequency for let's say the communicating with the customer, or what is the best channel, and honestly speaking, I don't think there's a magic number for what was the most optimal frequency per channel, but what would be very useful for brands to do is like there should be always a say from the customer. So be it like how do I easily opt out from certain channels, or what are the things that I'm more interesting to receive? So how do you make this as intuitive, as easy for them to pick and choose? That's one aspect. And also passively, like without the customer doing anything, so you could also observe how are they interacting with each channel, and leveraging either like a rule-based like a mechanism, or sometimes like some of the firms that they're using AI engine from some of the vendors to optimize, okay, which are the better channel to push, and what are the channels that they probably never going to open that message, or just save the cost of delivering that, and also make the customer feeling better without bombarding them. So that's probably one of the optimization that you can do. And secondly is I think like it's also very important sometimes to communicate why are we suggesting this to you. So taking back the Netflix example is like sometimes you will see, okay, why are they recommending these few episodes to you? Is because you have watched this. So it's sometimes very useful for the customer to also learn about, okay, you are giving me all these suggestions, but what is the basics of giving such? So sometimes like it increase the confidence of like clicking on those skills, because, okay, I really like these certain purchase products, so I'm more interested in also the related one. Or sometimes like if you're not having a correct guess of what they're interested in, at least they know what's the basis from it. Yeah.
Thank you. Amin, you were saying as well?
Sure. I guess when we look at it from a marketing perspective, if you have a new product that's coming to the market, the first tendency, or the first thing that goes through your head is, how do we get new customers and tell new customers about this new product, right? But one of the things that you can do is you can look at your existing sales history. And for us, one of the examples is, if we look at Nespresso, we know that we know who are the customers that are buying really, really strong coffee from particular regions, and that's their normal habit, that's their normal behavior. Instead of us spending money on more ads to get more new customers, if we give them a free sample, say, we know that you like this really, really strong coffee, here's another variation from a new region. We'd love to know what you think, right? We're increasing that engagement. We're giving them something to surprise and delight, but we're also creating brand advocacy and talkability. So it's not always about looking to you. The data that you have can give you a lot of insight, but it's up to you how you choose to use it and how you deliver that value. There's a number of cases, and there's a lot of opportunities of being able to do that, but it's also going through the channel and telling them what you're going to do with this information that you're collecting, and how this information. Now, next time when we go through the progressive profiling process with a consumer, where we ask them for more information, they love that, right? Because they know that that data is being used, and the friction in terms of collecting more information drops. So for us, it's about telling them that we're collecting the data, telling them why we collect the data, and actually acting on it. Surprisingly enough, there's a lot of people that collect data, and consumers are aware of that, where that's when the guards go up, and you need to build that respect. You need to build that relationship. It's just very hard to do at a scale. Thankfully, we have technology like Twilio.
Okay. So sounds
very
good.
wise words, Armin.
That's very Paul. Just want to address one question over here. How can companies with, I think there are a lot of examples already given by y'all, but actually how can companies with minimum budget, because since we have also the poll stating that cost is a function of that implementation, so how can companies with minimum budget put hyper-personalization into practice? Maybe quick, fast, but they can basically bridge that gap, pretty low cost. So anybody like to answer that?
I can start. I think from
Sure.
solutions and a technology approach, building right now seems the easiest way to pivot without necessarily committing to a solution that is out of the box and may not necessarily fit your needs as a small or medium-sized business. Because your budgets are limited, I think this is the biggest opportunity that companies have to start playing with APIs and platforms that allow them to almost pick and choose the channels and A/B test their experiences without necessarily embarking on major purchases or infrastructure changes, because with APIs you can basically augment and change and play at your own pace and scale, which is kind of like the critical aspect of survival nowadays. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be available in every channel and start, let's start doing augmented reality and then virtual reality. But if you start really understanding how you best communicate with your customers at a personal level by putting yourself in their shoes, is when you're going to start understanding your cohort and what their preferences are. That way, when you decide what to prioritize, you can build based on your needs, immediate and then long terms, without necessarily breaking your budget or really taking too much of a risk. I think that's something, and as Armin said, and obviously, I work for Twilio, but one of the main reasons I work for Twilio, and coming back to my, alliance with Danny, is because I come from the startup world. I know how hard it is to work with no money and still make it in 3 years, and having to develop solutions that are not just out of the box, but incredibly innovative. And the best way to do that today is through building. And a lot of companies may say, well, I don't have 10 developers. Trust me, you don't need expert 10 developers to develop on Twilio. It's pretty self-explanatory and easy. We even have Twilio Quest. It's a game. You learn how to code and develop. I created my app on my first week at Twilio. So trust me, it's worth exploring. And that's something I can bring to the table today with respect to your question.
Thank you, Alex. Maybe minimum budget is something that startups think about every day. When I was a startup as well. Yeah, so even for meals. So maybe Danny, you'd like to share with us.
Sure. So we talked to lots of startups, like some of those are very well funded, some of those are struggling, but at the same time, I think one key suggestion that we will offer them is always experimenting, and with minimum budget, you should always start simple. We have discussed lots of more advanced tactics today, but at the same time, lots of things are 80-20. If you haven't touched on those channels, if you haven't tried even a simple product recommendation widget on your website, go for it. And you don't need to make the things perfect at the first few months, but just try to tap into whatever channels that bring the biggest ROI, and then double down on it. And if those are not bringing you return, just drop it. So I think also one thing that is quite crucial is if you're engaging with any vendors or solution provider, be it you're gonna build it in-house or do a hybrid way, make sure that there's maybe a POC period, or if you need to engage in the contract, like you need to understand how flexible it is to maybe move your budget around the channels that is working best for you. So that's I would suggest like startup, like even though you have minimal budget, still be very experimental, but pivot very fast and look at the ROI weekly, monthly basis, and then allocate the resources to the one that is bringing you return. Yeah.
True blue startup style. Great. Okay, maybe let's switch to a different topic. I would like to talk about AI because I think AI has been implemented with hyper personalization, so like popularized in 2018. But at that point in time, it was the key term for delivering a personalized experience. It's also where I think it's a place where driving digital experience has grown to become more prominent as technology evolved. And recently, I saw like examples from machine learning as well, even picking up how your picture looks like and try to discern what kind of personality you may have. And this is in context to even retail. So, in your opinion, what are the emerging trends in customer experience over the next year? And how can retailers better leverage on their AI and their data to stay competitive? So I believe this is quite something in which our audience would also like to know. But I would like to start with Amit.
Sure. So I guess for us, given the reach that we have and the number of consumer contacts that we have, there's a lot of things that are repetitive, right? So for us, where we see the potential of AI is assisting humans. We don't see AI as something that's going to take the humans' jobs away. We see it as human-assisted technology. So how do we give that superpower ability to our staff, but also give that superpower ability to our consumers? And I'll give you two examples. So looking at our contact, for us, it's very important to respond to consumers in a timely manner. Someone that contacts us about a food concern or a health and safety concern, that's our utmost priority. And the time that we respond to that is really, really critical. And depending on the channel that they come from, whether it's phone, email, social. So when we see AI, and one of the key benefits is NLP, natural language processing, is it tells us what's the sentiment for that contact. It tells us the reason for the contact. And we can prioritize those responses compared to other queries and contacts that are not so relevant or not so important. I shouldn't say relevant, it's important. So that is giving the ability. So instead of our staff feeling overwhelmed and overworked, this helps them prioritize their workload, and we're more efficient at what we do. The other thing is, it's also, we see it as reducing friction when it comes to onboarding consumers and contacts. So for example, if we have an app for Purina, which we allow to customers to register their pets, we use AI to reduce some of that friction when they come to onboard their pets. So when they upload a photo of their pet, that's their pet's profile photo, but we use AI and image learning to figure out what kind of pet it is. What's the breed type? What's the dog size? That helps us personalize the communication. So if we know the pet is a poodle, we can personalize products that are tailored to that dog. Additionally, what we can do is we can also determine other things like, is the dog overweight, depending on the angle of the photo, and what are the goals that they're trying to achieve. So that all comes down to, it's not in an intrusive way. We tell consumers that this is what it's being used for, but it also helps make it easier for them to onboard. That's the role of AI that we
at the moment. Thank you so much. What about Alex? Would you like to share as well in the use of AI?
Yes, absolutely. I think similarly, the way we're using AI is basically to measure sentiment and also to support humans, not replace humans, as Armin mentioned. It's basically the ability to predict the nature of a conversation so that when someone calls customer service, they don't have to repeat their narrative over and over as the ticket is escalated. And it also helps with this massive amounts of incoming messages and calls that are coming. You know, we all have experienced the working from home situation where contact centers have had to be taken remote, and all of a sudden everybody and their grandmas are calling because they want to know the status of their packages. So how can you utilize AI in order to add agility to these processes without necessarily taking the human aspect out of it, but actually turning it into a facet that alleviates customer anxiety and offers more convenience? And as we go more into the aspect of understanding data, the contextualized communication aspect from what, for example, we do at Twilio comes from understanding a customer profile, not necessarily because we're taking notes actively as we're having a conversation, but the sense of predictability. And as, again, Armin said, like the ability to sense sentiment and measure it and scale it to the most that we can, because it's never a quantitative approach, but a qualitative approach. And this is where, you know, AI and ML now are coming hand in hand in order to increase or increment rather the intimacy that occurs perhaps when you're having a video or a broadcast without necessarily having to switch platforms, because that makes it less there's less friction. And so that's why when channels integrate and then you measure which one is a favorite and how is video better than perhaps a static conversation, how is this going to help a customer feel more connected to you, is where AI comes into place in terms of determining their preferences and how to best respond to their wants and needs at the time.
Thank you, Alex. Quite a different approach from Armin, but very interesting.
Just to add a bit on it, I think,
it's very interesting for me. Oh, Ben, yeah, please do.
Yeah.
Ben,
So I feel like the advancement in AI also help us to surface some of the parameter that previously we are not thinking that would be useful for the predictive, let's say, segmentation or as simple as product recommendation. One example I'm going to borrow is like it's from a financial institution startup. So they are doing lending, and probably you will think that okay, maybe income or the region is the most like let's say the location would be the most relevant algorithm for them to do some credit rating. But actually, like when they run the algorithm, when they accumulate enough information, even though the device type, the OS, or the timing that when to apply for the loan actually is also very critical for the default rate prediction. So some of those parameters, because of the advancement of AI, you are able to service this and put into your algorithm. And that's something that I think previously, if we are going from a very top-down view, okay, as a merchandiser, what do I think that would be relevant for the product recommendation? And you put those parameters versus now you are really digesting all sorts of attributes that you could collect and run those like machine learning that gives another perspective that maybe it won't surface. And another I think aspect is like when we are doing such a development, now lots of tactics we're using it on the online scenario because it's easier for the calculation, easier for the data collection, and also presentation. But we also see a trend that it is integrating with the offline scenario. So if you're visiting those like pharmaceutical store, supermarket, lots of trade marketing are being done there. There's huge budget spends in a very non-personalized way. But we also see, because of the visual recognition being available in the offline scenario, that you could also do a more smart targeting, be it like sample distribution or let's say ads display in those like physical store. It's also another trend that we have seen in the retail tech.
Interesting. Great. I think we are almost to our time, but we just want to address the last poll. What do you believe will be the emerging trends in customer experience over the next year? Well, overwhelmingly, I think it's AI. And I think all our panelists here, I think you have given different context to the AI aspect. And so I think the space for AI in terms of growth, in terms of exploration, is definitely there's something that's going to be next year. And personally, I don't think it's kind of like too expensive, or it really relies on a big budget to get this done. But I think it's more about knowing more about AI, what it can do. But it still goes back to the mindset of the business in really customer centricity. I think that is where it always go back to this point, and it is actually at the maturity of such mindset that you will start to explore technology, you'll start to explore your own practices. So that is my takeaway from this panel. So we're coming to the end. So I would like to thank all panelists. I would like to thank Trelio for sponsoring this panel. So we hope to see you again. So if there's anything that you'd like to learn more from the panelists, please feel free to catch up with them after this. All right. So we hope to see you next year. Thank you. So everybody, Alex, Danny, Amin, we'll see you next year.
See you next
Bye-bye.
year.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye
Take
bye.
care.
Bye.
Bye.